Welcome to Women's Wars, a podcast series from Bern. I am Georgina Bame. For this series, I have interviewed 10 extraordinary women from countries that emerged from the former Yugoslavia. They are activists and journalists who were inspired by the wars of the 90s to take action to support the survivors and advocate for human rights. By telling their stories, these courageous women show how wars continue to have an impact on ordinary people decades after they were fought. In this episode of Women's Wars, Shukrije Gashi recalls organizing protests demanding equal rights for ethnic Albanians in Yugoslavia in the 1980s, which led to her political imprisonment and her constant fight for women's rights and reconciliation. In the spring of 1979, Shukrije Gashi became involved in the national movement for the Republic of Kosovo within Yugoslavia, a movement demanding Kosovo be granted equal status to the Yugoslav republics and not remain an autonomous province under Serbia. Gashi became one of the organizers of protests in the 1980s, calling for the establishment of a Republic of Kosovo within the Yugoslav Federation. She participated in clandestine actions using the pseudonym Victoria, which means victory. Gashi was involved in writing slogans, including the rallying cry Kosovo Republic, or in Albanian, Kosova Republik, on walls and streets.
I have always been an activist and supported activism. At that time, it was a kind of resistance against what was somewhat consolidated. We will do something that will be meaningful, not only for our ethnic community, but also for all other communities. Naturally, in the circumstances at that time in Serbia, there was a fascist regime against the ethnic Albanian population in Kosovo. But it was important for me, through the frame of a national movement for an independent Kosovo, to create a space for women to participate in such platforms. In general, I have always been focused on women's rights. In the past, 9 years ago, it was unusual for women to participate in such activities that men considered to be reserved for them. But I have had the opportunity to have the support of my family. During the pre-war period, it was even harder to advocate for women's rights because the women's movements were very foggy for many reasons. First of all, because Kosovo was not equal to other Yugoslav republics. The approach towards Kosovo was different. Usually, women could have space only if they were related to the families who were close to the power holders. Those women had the opportunity to influence. Some of us who were journalists and activists, who constantly worked on the field with people, had more of a chance to feel closely the violence, even that not being spoken on the surface, but can be seen in practice such as poverty and unemployment. Women could also be active by avoiding authorities. Since the authorities were more focused on men, their goal was to arrest them. As for women and girls, the authorities could not think that they could be involved in such engagements. First, there was agitation, offering literature. We used different events, weddings, parties, different meetings because it was difficult to discuss openly and publicly during those years for the need to organize. However, the desire for national liberation and gender liberation managed to do what was needed. The difficulties were big. We were persecuted. In these circumstances, it was challenging, but we managed to exert our influence. Of course, the drafting of the document was very problematic because if even one was found, not only would you be imprisoned, but even something else could have happened. I remember at least 2,000 such slogans were written in my house and distributed around Pristina.
Gashi vividly recalls the student protest of 1981, which she was one of the organizers of. On March 11, 1981, students from the University of Pristina began a protest calling for Kosovo to become a republic. Many were arrested by Yugoslav police. The student demonstrations in March escalated into a chain of protests in April, and the Yugoslav authorities imposed a state of emergency and sent in security forces to crush the demonstrations. The New York Times reported at the time that 9 people died and more than 50 were injured in the violence in 6 cities. When she realized that she risked being arrested, Gashi stayed with relatives in villages and towns across Kosovo, including Podujeva, Verizaj, and Prizren. She even slept in cemeteries to evade the authorities, but also not endanger her family and friends. Nonetheless, she was eventually arrested on April 26, 1983, at her home and charged with separatist activities aimed at the destruction of Yugoslavia. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Imprisonment at such a young age would mark a significant amount of Gashi's life, hindering her opportunities while facing torture in prisons in Pristina, Lipian, and Mitrovica under the Yugoslav regime. Gashi would endure brutal conditions in prison, and while she was in prison, her closest collaborator and lover, Nuhi Berisha, would be killed in 1984. Could you tell us more about the imprisonment, the years you spent in prison, and if you had obstacles because of it after the imprisonment?
I constantly refused to talk about my actions. An interrogator could threaten you in many ways. He would put out a cigarette on my eyebrow and I would lose consciousness. There were times when you saw how people had lost their minds from torture and their lives too. But I never neglected my efforts for gender equality. On the contrary, I have strongly advocated with a maximum commitment, and I would say with passion, that we, girls and women prisoners, should not waste our time, but prepare to make efforts to achieve gender equality within the struggle for national equality by becoming part of the movements of the time. It was very difficult because, besides the imprisonment, a good part of my life I did not enjoy. The right to be free and continue my studies, my career, to be close to my family, the people I love, to be equal to others. The injustice against me continued even after I got out of prison. I was denied the right of a passport for more than 28 years, or more than a decade after getting out of prison. Once in the year 1997, I was a journalist. I was given a passport, and it was taken from me immediately 3 days later. On a trip to Macedonia, we were a group of women taking part in a meeting with Dutch Twinning Association. Entering Macedonia, the police stopped the bus I was on, ordered me to get off the bus, and then took a recording I had of an event on the field. They took my passport, and of course, they never returned it to me. But I am one of those who served one of the shortest jail terms. I was in prison nearly for 2 years. There have been others who served even more than this.
For the past 2 decades, Gashi has been the director of NGO Partners Kosovo Center for Conflict Management, which has expertise in mediation and conflict resolution training and works in transitional justice focusing on ethnic integration and reconciliation. Gashi used the lessons of her decades of activism to open the mediation program within the Partners Kosovo NGO soon after the 98-99 Kosovo War, and now offers her expertise and support on the field throughout the world.
Partners Kosovo Center for Conflict Management, member of Partners Global International Network, for all these years of existence has done a great job in several programs, which I would like to highlight because I consider it is important. Since your focus in this interview is more on transitional justice in Kosovo, I can say that Transitional Justice Program is a strong thread that runs through all other programs that I will mention, such as mediation, women and youth leadership, prevention and countering violent extremism, transitional justice, local government, training program, and Resiliency Plus activities. Regarding the mediation program, Partners Kosovo introduced Kosovo's first draft law on mediation in 2002, marking a pioneering effort in this field. Subsequently, we sought support from international organizations, especially since the United Nations was competent in this and other fields. We also have conducted training, mediation, and mediating, and we have come successful in mediating until 2012 to solve over 400 cases of different natures of disagreements and disputes. And for many years, we have been training thousands of individuals, representatives of non-governmental organizations, not only in Kosovo, but also abroad.
Have you or Kosovo managed to include gender mainstreaming in the transitional justice processes?
As a structure, meaning in the formulation of the strategy for transition of justice in Kosovo, gender mainstreaming stands, but if it will be properly demonstrated in practice is yet to be seen. I'm convinced that the civil society, which is conscious and has been responsive during all these years, will react again, if in practice it is not demonstrated as such.
Thank you for listening. You can find more installments of our Women's Wars series in our website, balkaninsight.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.